When 15 highly trained doctors fail, an unexpected housekeeper discovers the amazing truth. Mary tightened her grip on the mop as she moved through the hospital corridors, her heart pounding with the weight of her father's illness. The sterile smell of antiseptic stung her nostrils and reminded her of the bitter irony, a revered doctor reduced to a listless patient. Each swipe of her mop felt like an army marching against time, battling the encroaching shadows of despair that loomed ever closer. She was a housekeeper, nothing more in their eyes, yet she carried the burden of her past on her shoulders, hoping for a miracle that seemed increasingly out of reach. Her young daughter Emily stood like a beacon in the heaviness surrounding Mary. Each smile hidden behind tired cheeks reminded her of the weight of every tiny sacrifice she made for a better future. The bills were relentless, the car was barely running, and the endless cycle of financial struggle consumed her like a quicksand of despair. What kind of life could she provide for Emily if her father's battle was lost? Anxiety twisted in her stomach, generating tension that felt like too much to bear. Just as she passed the doctor's offices, a fractured thought gnawed at her. What if the very system she relied upon had failed her and her father? With every question unanswered, the team of 15 doctors had confirmed her worst fears. Indifference wore the smug face of expertise. The clinical jargon they tossed around only stoked the fire of her anger and despair. It could be this or that, they suggested, tossing her into a sea of uncertainty. Mary clenched her fists, feelings of helplessness washing over her as the whispers of dismissive laughter echoed in her mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she meticulously dusted off the doctor's offices, a flicker of change sparked inside her. Hidden among the neglected medical records piled on the desk sat a glimmer of hope. Could these forgotten papers hold answers? Curiosity ignited her determination as she sifted through them, her eyes racing over symptoms that echoed her father's articulations. A rare condition linked to his struggles leapt off the pages. Every beat of her heart synchronized with the growing urgency in her chest. Yet shadows of doubt crept in. How could she challenge the authority of the doctors, armed only with unrefined knowledge? A gentle hand touched her shoulder, breaking her train of thought. It was Karen, the experienced nurse. Their eyes locked for a moment, understanding pulsing through the air. "I see that spark in you," she said, her voice low. "Let me help. Together we can—" But the words hung between them as the fear of confrontation bubbled up inside Mary. In that critical moment, uncertainty crushed her spirit, yet the burning urgency to protect her father remained. As thoughts raced, "Can I trust Karen? Will she understand?" the tension reached a boiling point. What if the information they unearthed wasn't enough? The stakes were painfully high. The very doctors whom she so desperately wanted to trust and rally for her father now appeared as obstacles, and Mary's resolve began to surge. The oppressive walls of the hospital bore witness as she took a deep breath. She would not let her father down. If the doctors could not save him, she would fight for the truth herself. The anger, fear, and desperation coiled together, an emotional tempest ripping through her. Just as she prepared to confront the doctors, a nurse rushed in with news that could alter everything. Mary's heart thudded in her chest. Clarity was close, but at what cost? Would her father's life hang in the balance while she grappled with fear? The answers waited on the horizon, teetering between hope and urgent desperation.
Mary felt a whirlwind of emotions crash through her as the nurse's words sank in like a stone in turbulent waters. The murmurings of the bustling hospital seemed to recede, leaving only the drum roll of her heartbeat. The nurse's revelation hinted at potential allies in her quest for answers, but would they join her side or double down with the very system that had already failed her father? "Your father's test results have come back," the nurse said, her face a mixture of urgency and sympathy. "There may be a treatment, one that the doctors haven't fully explored yet." Mary stood there, gripped by a wave of cautious hope. The glimmering prospect of new possibilities ignited something fierce within her. However, rising to the challenge also meant stepping into a territory that felt dangerously unfamiliar. She felt an absurdity. How could a housekeeper engage in medical discourse, demand knowledge, or confront the very men and women cloaked in lab coats? "You have a right to see the results," the nurse continued, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. "But approaching the doctors about this treatment could get pushback. Be prepared." Mary nodded, determination crystallizing in her mind. She tightened her grip on the mop handle, feeling its coarse wood under her palm serve as a reminder of her grit. Each day spent running from room to room, clearing debris and helping patients maintain some shred of dignity, had unknowingly forged her resilience. This was a fight she would not shy away from. Before heading towards the doctor's station, she glanced at the stacks of medical files she had previously examined. Not just junk cluttering the desks, but powerful sources of knowledge. A surge of confidence flowed through her. She remembered what she had read about the symptoms echoing her father's condition and realized she possessed vital insights. "Maybe," she whispered to herself, "I am capable of more." Mary found herself standing before a group of doctors, lost in their conversation about her father's case. Steeling herself, she cleared her throat, drawing their attention. Their faces shifted from casual discussion to icy detachment. Her heart raced as the weight of their scrutiny turned toward her. "Excuse me, but I've found something relevant to my father's condition," she said, her voice tremulous yet firm. She locked eyes with Dr. Matthews, an arrogant surgeon who exuded disdain for anyone outside his profession. "I need to discuss it with you." Instead of the respect she hoped for, Dr. Matthews looked her up and down, dismissing her without a word. His colleagues nodded along, caught up in cynicism. "This is hardly the time, Miss Thompson," he said, turning back to his notes as though she were nothing more than an annoying fly at a banquet. The coldness of their rejection ignited a flame inside her. "You are wrong. I have valid information," she pressed, her hands trembling, but her resolve steeling against their critique. "The recent tests indicate something you aren't considering, something that should be addressed urgently." Each word left her mouth as both a plea and a challenge. What she lacked in formal authority, she made up for with raw conviction and unexpected tenacity. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The doctor's laughter faded, replaced by curiosity and disbelief. Dr. Matthews focused his attention back on her. "What sort of information are you talking about?" he asked, but the sneer returned, skepticism lacing his tone. As Mary opened her mouth to speak, revealing the details she had uncovered, she felt stronger, more significant than her job title implied, and closer to uncovering the truth she had so long pursued. But the real test lay ahead. Would they listen? The tension hung palpably, the doctors' faces darkened with uncertainty, at being challenged by someone they had deemed an underling. Would this moment propel her into a new chapter in her life, or would fear once again slam the door shut? With a deep breath, Mary prepared to reveal the knowledge that could tip the scales of her father's fate, but she couldn't shake the anxiety of the impending fallout. Would this bold step yield change, or would it only serve to deepen her isolation? The gravity of the moment weighed heavily as she prepared to pour everything she had fought for into those present, ready to either spark a revolution in the face of the medical establishment or witness their cold indifference once more.
Mary felt the weight of the moment press against her chest like a vice, her mind racing through the scattered thoughts that clamored for attention. She opened her mouth, and a rush of words tumbled forth, fueled by desperation and unyielding conviction. The results show a potential for inflammation that hasn't been addressed in your protocols. The treatment my father could receive isn't just theory. It's happening in other cases similar to his, and you need to reconsider your approach. Each syllable echoed with a challenge, defiant in the face of their collective skepticism. Dr. Matthews raised an eyebrow, and for a brief moment, surprise flickered in his eyes. The surrounding doctors shifted uncomfortably, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by an insistent murmur of curiosity. It was a glimmer, a crack in their facade, and Mary seized it, her resolve igniting like a flame catching dry wood. I've spent hours reading through his tests and records. There are connections I've made that you all may have overlooked, she continued, her voice steadying as the confidence she'd hidden for so long began to surface. What if the treatment you haven't considered could desperately change his prognosis? The silence that followed felt expansive, every second stretching into an eternity. Dr. Matthews frowned, mulling over her words, as though he battled an internal storm. Others joined in, leaning closer, their skepticism beginning to melt away. Mary wondered if they had ever truly realized how much she had absorbed in those hours spent scanning dank hospital rooms and charts. "Where did you read about this?" a younger doctor asked, tilting his head, hopeful yet cautious. "Wider case studies suggest early intervention can lead to significantly better outcomes, especially with inflammation," she countered, with a glimmer of excitement igniting her reply. The corners of her mouth curled slightly as she imagined unleashing a deluge of verified knowledge. "If we act quickly, it could save my father's life." It was exhilarating. The moment felt almost surreal as she transitioned from the invisible worker within the hospital walls to a formidable advocate for her father's health. Recognizing the dynamics shift, she boldly pressed on, energized by the support glimmering within their curiosity. But her triumph was tinged with anxiety. What if their interest faded? What if they decided to quash her fervor? Their presence still loomed heavily, the power dynamics unfurling before her in a daunting spectacle. Dr. Matthews finally straightened his posture, his gaze sharpening with renewed focus. "Let's review your observations, Miss Thompson," he declared, an edge of begrudging respect threading through his tone. His colleagues began to nod, tentative yet intrigued, as the tide turned towards her favor. With each passing moment, Mary felt emboldened. For the first time, knowledge felt like a shield, protecting her from their scorn, transforming their perceived authority into a collaborative dialogue rather than a dead end. The confrontation tested every belief she had held about herself. Could a housekeeper really bring change within a bastion of medicine? As they discussed her findings and considerations, a realization bloomed in her mind. This was not just about her father's treatment. This was a glimpse into her potential to initiate meaningful discourse, a voice that resonated, strange yet powerful, in a space typically reserved for the educated elite. "Make
sure you share your data with them. It could lead to breakthroughs," the eager doctor chimed in, inspired by her courage. The jubilance felt electric, each heartbeat resonating with a purpose that had eluded her in the past. Yet, as the conversation unfolded and suggestions flew, she couldn't ignore the lurking doubt at the back of her mind. What if this was just an anomaly, a fleeting moment of collaboration before reverting back to indifference? Mary had gained movement, yes, but with that came deeper questions about how to sustain this momentum. The stakes were high, balancing personal hope against the uncharted realities of institutional bureaucracy. Would she be ready to stand her ground as needed, protect her father, and guide herself through this newfound awareness? Determination surged through her as she faced the doctors again. The next step loomed, but uncertainty no longer felt daunting. It was an uncharted territory ripe for exploration. Suddenly, a chill slithered down her spine as a heavy-set, white-haired figure entered the room. A senior administrative authority with a reputation for harsh sanctioning of disruptions in protocol. Mary's heart sank. She recognized the battle she faced could take a darker turn at any moment. The nature of this newfound reality trembled on a cusp of uncertainty, heralding a confrontation that would demand everything she had just begun to discover about her own tenacity. Would she continue to push forward, or was she ceding ground to intimidation once again? The moment of truth was drawing near, and she felt as if the pull of destiny urged her towards a threshold she had not yet dared cross. Mary's stomach flipped as the imposing figure of Mr. Caldwell strode into the room, exuding a tangible authority. She recognized him from the whispered conversations of discontent among the staff. The weight of his reputation pressed down on her like a dark cloud, casting a long shadow over the hope she had just ignited. "Dr. Matthews," Caldwell's voice sliced through the atmosphere, cold and commanding. "What's this I hear about a potential protocol shift suggested by a housekeeper?" He turned his gaze towards Mary, assessing her like a bird of prey sizing up its next meal. "Let me assure you that mixing roles in medical decision-making is not advisable and certainly not encouraging." An involuntary surge of defensiveness rose within Mary, but she willed herself to remain composed. This was it. She was standing at the brink, and she could either retreat into the background she had always inhabited, or she could fight to validate her presence, her ideas, and her father's life. "Sir," she began, her voice steady despite every instinct urging her to yield, "I'm not suggesting a shift based on whim or unfounded hope. The data I have—" "Your data?" Caldwell cut in sharply. "You expect us to believe that a non-medical professional has insights more valuable than what our trained specialists present?" A tense silence enveloped the room. Mary felt the collective eyes of the doctors weighing upon her.
Their curiosity now laced with hesitance, but determination pulsed strongly in her veins. "What I'm suggesting could directly affect my father's treatment. It's not about credentials, it's about results." Caldwell raised his eyebrows in mock surprise, but didn't respond. He focused instead on Dr. Matthews, a subtle hint of intimidation reflected in his posture. "I trust you'll take the necessary precautions to ensure no unverified practices are considered here." Dr. Matthews, caught between the tempest of Caldwell's authority and Mary's earnest conviction, appeared torn. "I believe there is merit in Miss Thompson's findings, Mr. Caldwell. Exploring her perspective could lead us to an innovative approach." Mary leaned forward, her heart racing. "If we discuss the studies and protocols, maybe we can synthesize a better path forward. The doctors before you can look at the diagnostic material I've compiled." Caldwell's eyes narrowed, measuring the weight of her challenge. "Understand this, Miss Thompson. This isn't an advocacy platform. We don't hinge our decisions on anecdotal experiences." "No," she replied firmly, the fire in her belly kindling. "But real lives are at stake. My father's life is at stake. Allowing fear of unconventional approaches to overshadow our medical judgment could lead to preventable loss." A moment hung in the balance, recognition sparking in the eyes of the gathered doctors. Mary had crossed a line, but perhaps the line was where the real potential for change lay. Caldwell's expression flickered. The authority he wielded was rattled by her steadfast fervor. "This is becoming more complex than I prefer," he replied finally, a hint of irritation breaking through his cool demeanor. "I'm going to recommend, very strongly, that all further discussions happen with proper oversight. There are rules to follow for a reason." As he turned to leave, Mary watched a lingering glimmer of doubt cross his features. Maybe she had made an impact after all. For the first time, she felt the tide of change swelling, nudging against the rocky barriers of an unforgiving institution. Mary felt the momentum shift like tectonic plates beneath her feet. Could she leverage this moment to challenge not just the system, but her own standing within it? Standing shoulder to shoulder with these doctors felt monumental, like casting a shadow of her past aside. As the discussion began again, she poured herself into every detail, keen to make her voice an undeniable force. The challenge ahead loomed larger. A confrontation with Caldwell was on the horizon, strong enough to either bolster her newfound voice or cast her back into silence. But with a spark ignited within, Mary recognized this was just the first skirmish in a much larger battle. What if she could reach beyond not only the doctor's hesitations, but also her own limitations? Would she emerge as a catalyst for real change? Or was she merely setting herself up for another moment of disillusionment? Closing her eyes briefly, she inhaled deeply, ready to align her thoughts like soldiers on a battleground. The upcoming meeting with Caldwell parted the
veil of uncertainty, making way for deeper questions within herself. Could she embrace this uncertainty as a path to discovering who she was meant to become? The moment of truth was drawing nearer still, and Mary sensed the universe signaling the urgency of her next choice. Mary's anticipation crackled like electricity in the air as she prepared for her upcoming meeting with Mr. Caldwell. She sensed the weighty significance of that moment, a turning point dangling just out of reach. The notion of backtracking terrified her, yet the thought of forging ahead filled her with uncertainty. This was her chance to dismantle the barriers of skepticism surrounding her in an environment that dictated identity through credentials rather than merit. In the hours leading to their meeting, she reviewed her notes with fervor, her heart echoing the importance of each word she meticulously had crafted. The statistics she had gathered were compelling, their implications resonating deeply with her desperate hope for her father. But she understood that facts alone wouldn't suffice. She needed to prepare her mind for Caldwell's potential jabs and dismissals. 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting with Caldwell and the board, she flipped through the pages of her research one last time, only to spot an anomaly, a pattern of success discrepancies wherever training diluted intuition. Each example painted a picture of care that transcended mere protocol. A warmth surged through her. This wasn't simply about individual lives, but a larger narrative about how institutions could stifle groundbreaking insights born from unconventional sources. The realization that courage could ignite change selflessly propelled her trust in her own voice. Compassion isn't bound by degrees, she whispered to herself, the words blooming into a mantra. As she stepped into the conference room, its minimalistic decor felt sterile and oppressive, mirroring the rigidity of the entrenched system she faced. Seated were Caldwell and the other doctors, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open skepticism. She took a deep breath, an invitation to silence her tumult of nerves. "Miss Thompson, we appreciate you joining us again," Caldwell began, his tone condescending yet formal. "Let's address your proposal." "Thank you," Mary replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I've prepared insights based on my findings that shed light on the medical protocols concerning care optimization. I believe they merit thorough examination." She started presenting her data, evoking passionate illustrations that stretched beyond clinical measures. With each detail shared, Mary could feel their eyes widen, anticipating the implications of her convictions. Caldwell's habitual demeanor began to crack slightly, the skepticism yielding to the first flickers of intrigue. "Are you suggesting," Caldwell interjected, his voice steady but colder, "that instinct and personal experience can outweigh established protocols?" "No," Mary exclaimed, unnerved but resolute. "What I'm saying is that both can coexist. Protocols are invaluable, but they shouldn't completely overshadow an empathetic approach toward care, especially when lives hang in the balance. The connection to understanding holistic treatment has often been overlooked by a narrow focus on clinical practice. Tension thickened the air, her nerve-corded speech hanging heavily as Caldwell attempted to regain control. Those connections can lead to a slippery slope of unverified practices that put patients at risk. Aren't you concerned about validity? I'm concerned about lives, Mr. Caldwell, Mary snapped, the righteous anger climbing within her. If we stay shackled to fear of change, we risk losing our humanity in the pursuit of procedure. My father's care could greatly benefit from an individualized approach rooted in genuine insight. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. This was more than a meeting. It was a trial of her essence, her beliefs against a titan of traditionalism. Each doctor exchanged glances, a web of intrigue weaving around them, and slowly their resistance began to ebb. Caldwell, visibly ruffled, held her gaze for a beat longer than necessary before retreating behind his scripted authority. You have a strong passion, Miss Thompson, but passion alone doesn't dictate practice. I'll consider your input, but I urge you to understand the importance of our established protocols. Passion is supported by data, Mary countered, her voice steady. Perhaps it's time for us to reflect on how those protocols might blind us to progress. As Caldwell concluded the meeting, Mary felt a simmering determination bloom within her. The battle wasn't over, and if today had taught her one thing, it was that she wasn't merely an outsider looking in. She was a contender, capable of reshaping the very framework of healthcare discourse. As she packed her notes, Mary resolved to prepare for the next skirmish. She had pierced the veil of complacency, and the ground beneath her was shifting. But could she transform this small victory into a resounding call for change? Would she be able to endure the inevitable fallout from Caldwell's persistence to uphold the status quo? The anticipation of what lay ahead churned within her, excitement threading through her veins like lifeblood, beckoning her toward a confrontation that loomed ominously on the horizon. With the board meeting lingering in her mind like a phantom she couldn't shake off, Mary sat at her cluttered desk, her heart still racing with the adrenaline of confrontation. She had merely cracked open a door, but the vast expanse beyond it posed challenges she hadn't yet fully considered. Caldwell's dismissive attitude, while infuriating, had also ignited a fierce determination in her. She stared at the files on her desk, heavy with research and statistics, but now the numbers felt different. Each statistic transformed into a face, a patient, a family, a life. The personal stories behind the data materialized, forcing her to confront the fierce truth. She wasn't fighting for mere policy change, she was advocating for humanity. "How do I act on this?" she muttered in frustration. Was she merely a clarion for change, or could she be the agent of it? The next logical step floated to the surface. She needed allies. Calculating her options, she considered who among her peers might share her vision. Quickly, Mary jotted down names of colleagues who had exhibited warmth and genuine care for their patients. Their experiences could lend weight to her perspective, perhaps creating a coalition that would lend her efforts legitimacy. Yet, a disquieting thought flickered through her mind. Just as she had challenged Caldwell's scenes of protocol, would these potential allies be secure enough in their own convictions to stand alongside her? Fear tangled with resolve. Trusting others to share her ambitions felt risky, but remaining isolated would only allow Caldwell and his faction to tighten their grip on conventionality. Determined not to be undermined, Mary reached for her phone. She texted a close friend from her training program, Lisa, with whom she had often shared ideas about patient-centered approaches. Within moments, Lisa responded affirmatively, expressing her frustration at the retention of outdated practices in the system. This spark ignited a flicker of hope in Mary, propelling her to reach out to others from her list. After a series of encouraging conversations, excitement bubbled within her. Each response reaffirmed her vision, and before she knew it, Mary had set up an informal meeting. She envisioned a space for discussion where her initial proposition could move from mere words to tangible action. But as she finalized the arrangements, a creeping anxiety returned. What if Caldwell got wind of this plan? Would he retaliate? Would the rest of the board close ranks, making her out to be an outsider who threatened their impenetrable fortress of methodology? The specter of fear danced alongside her fledgling courage, demanding she confront her own vulnerabilities. With a deep breath, Mary steeled herself against doubt. "I won't be quiet," she promised herself aloud. "These lives, my father's life, is worth every risk." It was a personal vow, tinged with urgency, tethered firmly to the choice she had to face. As the sun dipped lower, an idea struck her that caused a rush of excitement. She remembered her father's stories about times he had been a patient, moments when he had felt overlooked, not as a person, but merely a case study. The notion of patient narratives being woven into healthcare protocols now buzzed within her like a live wire. Could pairing her data with personal testimonials give her premise the gravity she needed? Her heart raced as she darted toward her laptop. Thoughtfully, she began drafting a new proposal, blending her data with the rich tapestry of human experience. A call that could elevate her argument beyond the confines of sterile statistics. This wasn't just about protocols versus intuition. This could be a movement. As she saved the document, Mary's mind spiraled into a whirlwind of ideas and potential pitfalls. Dawson, one of the doctors she had previously anticipated would be unfriendly, had exhibited a faint nod of acknowledgement during her presentation. Perhaps he was a more complex ally than she realized. She would have to navigate the intricacies of personalities and power plays intricately woven within the formal board.
Medical hierarchy. With this newfound determination, Mary reached for her phone one last time, texting Lisa about the idea. A response came back quickly, charging her with enthusiasm. "That's brilliant! I'm in!" Energized by their shared commitment, Mary took a step back, looking at the layers of her situation unfurling before her. Forging bonds with those who believed in her vision felt liberating, yet the looming question remained. What hidden narratives could she uncover to solidify her stance? As she pondered the vital stories yet unspoken within her community, a sense of inevitability washed over her. The real fight was only just beginning, and no one, not even Caldwell, would strip her of her voice. But just then, a notification pinged on her phone, a message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped as she opened it, her curiosity piqued. It read, "I know about your proposal. You should come and talk to me. I have something to share." Mary sat frozen, the chilling weight of intrigue setting in. Was this a blessing or a threat? And who was this mysterious figure ready to step into the fray? Mary's fingers hovered over the screen, trembling slightly as she absorbed the implications of the message. She had no idea who reached out, but the urgency in the words was impossible to ignore. It felt like a thread, thin but taut, leading to an unseen truth. Did this person possess insider knowledge, perhaps even a key to the obstacles she faced? With a measured breath, she replied, cautiously suggesting a time to meet. The anticipation clawed at her, igniting a mix of excitement and apprehension. She reflected on her journey thus far, recalling the weight of every confrontation, every supportive conversation. So much had shifted in such a short time, and now a new opportunity loomed that could either propel her efforts forward or plunge her further into darkness. As the meeting day approached, Mary prepped herself mentally, mapping out every angle. The contrasting visions of Caldwell's rigid protocols and her emerging focus on compassionate healthcare played like a film strip across her mind. How seriously could she stake her claim on the proposed shift? The pressure tightened around her chest, a reminder of the stakes involved. She arrived at the nondescript cafe, choosing a corner table, her sanctuary before the storm.
The hum of conversations masked her internal monologue as she sipped her coffee, each sip a mix of fear and determination. What if this stranger was connected to Caldwell? What if they had ulterior motives? She saved her calculated skepticism for the unknown. As she waited, a flurry of emotions coursed through her. The image of her father, frail and lost in a world that disregarded him as just another entry in the system, crystallized anew. This meeting felt like a leap of faith, essential and terrifying. Then, the door swung open, drawing Mary's attention. A woman in her 40s, dressed in modest attire with a warm smile, approached.
Her? I'm Lucy, she introduced herself, her presence exuding an easy confidence that seemed genuine. Mary returned the smile, signaling her readiness to engage. Thank you for coming, Mary said, gesturing for Lucy to sit. Lucy leaned in slightly, her expression shifting from pleasant to intensely serious. I've heard about your proposal, and I know the resistance you're facing. I've witnessed firsthand how the system can stifle not just innovation, but the very people we should be caring for. Mary's heartbeat quickened. How do you know about my proposal? I work in the hospital's maintenance department, and I've been there long enough to observe what happens when policy clashes with compassion, she explained, her voice low but steady. I have stories that aren't documented but hold truth, and I think they could help. Mary's interest peaked, every word resonating like a bell in her mind. She leaned closer, urging Lucy to share. 3 months ago, I overheard a physician dismiss a patient's concerns because of a technicality. It made me think of my mother, a patient often overlooked. I've gathered a collection of similar accounts from nurses and fellow staff who felt powerless to intervene. It's a silent uproar. Mary gripped her cup tightly. The notion of patients feeling unseen twisted painfully in her gut. Your insights could be essential, but how do we turn this into a movement? Lucy's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. We need to show them that voices silenced are not without power. We collect stories. We share the humanity behind them. If you can weave data with these narratives, we may create an unstoppable force. A sense of responsibility washed over Mary. But with this newfound clarity came a growing realization. The defining challenge lay not just in the acquisition of testimonials, but in mobilizing them effectively. Could they truly push through the institution's facade? Would Caldwell's circle implode? The cogs in Mary's mind whirred. The implications were staggering. This was a dramatic shift from what she had initially conceived. Inflated courage replaced her lingering doubts. We need to gather everyone we can. If those who care unite behind this, we can alter perceptions. As they plotted their next steps, Mary felt the pulse of the narrative, fueled by raw experiences, grounded and undeniably human. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was a collaboration linking countless lives. They decided to hold informal gathering sessions in the hospital to foster community conversations. It was risky, but the urgency of their mission demanded bold moves. However, as they strategized the next phase, a fleeting thought flickered. How would Caldwell respond if he caught wind of their efforts? Would he label them as insurgents or pioneers? The identity crisis of her movement gnawed Mary, even amidst the inspiration she felt. As they wrapped up, Mary's phone buzzed with another notification. A fleeting moment satisfied her curiosity, until she read, "I have more information. We need to speak, soon." This time, the weight curled tightly with uncertainty. Who else was involved in this intricate web of revelation? Mary's stomach churned, bracing her for the realities of transformation that were tangibly close, yet frighteningly complex. Mary set down her phone, her mind racing with the implications of the new message. The words seemed to pulse with urgency, reverberating against her thoughts like a drumbeat. Another link in the tangled web she had unwittingly stepped into. She could feel the momentum building, new insights, potential allies, but also an impending confrontation that loomed like a storm cloud. As Lucy chatted about potential strategies, Mary's attention drifted inward. She recalled her encounters with Caldwell, the way his dismissive smirk triggered a sense of anger and indignation. Each interaction had chipped away at the confines of her professional identity, a young woman eager to climb the ranks, now transformed into a champion for change. But was she prepared for the fallout of a movement she had barely begun to shape? "I think we need to talk to staff during their shifts, foster some dialogue where they feel safe and free to share," Lucy continued, unaware of Mary's spiral of thought. "If we do it right, we can gather a treasure trove of experiences, the kind that rips apart the clinical data Caldwell clings to." "Absolutely," Mary replied, forcing her thoughts back to the present. "But let's be smart about it. We can't draw attention too quickly. We need to cultivate a trust that they'll share their stories without fear of repercussions." The weight of their endeavor settled on Mary's shoulders like a heavy coat. Could they slip past the watchful eyes of the administration? The initial euphoria stirred anxiety within her. If they were caught, the consequences could range from reprimands to termination. "Let's start small," Lucy suggested. "Just a few informal sessions where we talk. Over coffee, in breaks, make it casual. It'll create a rhythm and allow for organic sharing. Then we can compile everything discreetly." Mary tapped her fingers rhythmically on the table, an instinctual release of her burgeoning anxiety. "What if we approach some of the nurses first? If they're willing to back us, it'll carry weight." The plan formed like a horizon at dawn, distant yet tangible. Each small decision urged Mary forward, prompting her to confront the tension drawn between her cautious nature and the passionate flame igniting within her. They agreed to hold the first session at the hospital cafeteria during the evening shift change. The thought of gathering professionals in a no-pressure environment struck the right chord. But would they show up? Would it be enough to entice them to share their fears and frustrations? As they finalized their plans, Mary's phone buzzed again. The message from the unknown number seemed to mock her commitment. "Are you really willing to risk it all for their stories? Think about what you would lose." Mary's heart sank as every personal sacrifice flooded her mind. The hours spent grieving her father, the relentless drive to prove herself in an unforgiving system, and now the precarious stance she had taken against it. Doubt clawed at her resolve, twisting it into guilt. Yet the notion of pushing through the consequences was exhilarating, an electric current sparking within her veins. "Are you okay?" Lucy's voice brought her back as she looked up. Mary could sense the shift in atmosphere surrounding them. It was laden with unspoken anxieties. "Just thinking," she muttered, tapping her phone screen to forcefully dismiss the message. "I know risks come with this, but it can't be for nothing." Lucy nodded, sensing the twitch of Mary's steely determination. Together, they would forge a path through the fear. To hesitate was to relent, and Mary refused to turn back now. As they stood to leave, Mary resolved to distance herself from lingering doubts. One significant decision awaited, the courageous move that could redefine her life's work. The battle was spinning beyond her control, but the fight for compassion ignited a relentless fire within her. Yet, as though the universe sensed her readiness, Mary received another buzz. It was a call, a number she didn't recognize, but instincts propelled her to answer. "Hello? Mary, we need to talk. It's urgent. You might want to sit down." Her stomach clenched, dread intertwining with anticipation. What unexpected truth awaited her? "Mary, are you there?" The voice on the line was familiar yet strained. It was Delilah, one of the orderlies she had worked with during her early days at the hospital. The urgency threaded through her tone unsettlingly. "I can't tell you everything over the phone, but you need to listen. You're in danger." Danger? Mary felt as though she had stepped into a small, dark room with no exit. Her heart raced as she thought about the risks she was taking, against Caldwell, against a system that thrives on silence and compliance. "What are you talking about, Delilah?" Mary replied, forcing calmness into her voice.
Why would I be in danger? This isn't just about your little plan. Things are starting to stir in the background. People are watching you closely, and not everyone is as forgiving as they seem. I overheard something that could change everything, but you need to be careful. I'll meet you at the usual spot tonight, okay?" The line went silent, and Mary was left with a lump of anxiety settling in her throat. She didn't even have the chance to process the implications of Delilah's message before her mind was flooded with questions. Would anyone be able to support her? Would they even want to? Each possibility branded her with doubt as she paced the floor, her thoughts bouncing wildly between concern and determination to act. She could feel the clock ticking. Time pressed against her like a weight, reminding her that the session in the cafeteria loomed ahead. Swallowing hard, she reminded herself why she was fighting. The faces of the nurses, the aides, she thought of their unseen struggles, the whispered complaints over shifts, and the dismissive attitudes from Caldwell. They
deserved a voice. At that moment, Mary understood that her efforts went beyond her dreams of climbing the ranks. They were about challenging the ragged edges of an institutional culture that thrived on endurance rather than empathy. Each second spent deliberating, each detail untangled in the plan, served not just her ambition, but also something deeper, a longing for truth. To focus her determination, she envisioned the staff meeting. Smiling faces, shared laughter over a cup of coffee. These camaraderie-laden moments were the backbone of her workplace community. But would they transform into a courageous network willing to speak out against the erratic whims of management? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her reverie. Another text from the unknown number. "You can't actually believe you're prepared. Are you really ready for the consequences?" Taking a breath, Mary wavered between the urge to respond and the decision to ignore it. This was part of the game, the psychological warfare that kept her paralyzed by second-guessing. She chose not to engage this time, instead tightening the resolve in her core. Later, as Mary stood in front of the cafeteria where the meeting was to take place, adrenaline coursed through her veins. She set a steady expression on her face, determined to project authority gained not from seniority, but from conviction. She would lead this charge, not as a subordinate, but as a challenger of the status quo. She arrived early, setting the tables with care, visualizing the moment when the first faces would enter, when she would break the ice with stories and share her own. The first pair of nurses arrived, exchanging cautious glances. Sensing their apprehension, Mary's heart quickened. Words danced dangerously on the tip of her tongue. She was ready to ask them about their struggles. Would they trust her? And if they did, how far would she and they go to fight for change? The door swung open, and a group began to fill the space. This was it, the crucial moment that could tilt the balance of everything she worked for. As the voices began to swell, the atmosphere charged with unseen challenges ahead, Mary felt her breath catch once more. "Mary," a voice called from the corner of the room, a voice she recognized, yet did not welcome. It was Caldwell. Her pulse quickened. The battle was about to escalate, and she was standing on the front lines. Did she have the strength to face him? The resolve deepened as she realized this was her personal reckoning, and through it she would begin to forge her path, regardless of the stakes. Mary squared her shoulders, ready to confront whatever would come next, knowing all too well that every truth unveiled could change everything for her and those she would stand beside. "Let's get started," she declared, not yet realizing how much the confrontation with Caldwell would test her newfound commitment. Mary stood at the podium, the scent of coffee blending seamlessly with the muted rustle of anticipation among her colleagues. The cafeteria, once a mundane setting for quick lunches, transformed into a platform where she would voice the change her heart longed to see. Distant murmurs filled the air, a mix of anxiety and determination rippling through the gathered staff as the door creaked open, revealing Mr. Caldwell.
The room fell silent as he strode in, his every step echoing like a judge entering a courtroom. Clearing her throat, Mary tightened her grip on the podium. "Thank you all for coming today. We're here to discuss how we can improve our approach to patient care and address some important issues that many of you have faced." Her voice rang out, clear and steady. It felt both exhilarating and daunting as she recognized the stakes lying ahead. Caldwell's cold stare pierced through her, holding an air of skepticism that only fueled her resolve. "We're not here to entertain unqualified opinions on established protocols, Mary," he interrupted, his tone dripping dismissiveness. "Let's not waste time." But rather than wither under his glare, Mary felt an electricity course through her. "With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, these are not simply opinions. They are realities faced by countless staff and patients. It's time we recognize the human side of our profession." Her fierce declaration broke the weight of tension hanging in the air. She turned to the nurses beside her, their supportive nods igniting her courage. "Last week, I gathered stories, real experiences from our shifts, where patients felt unseen or unheard. This isn't just data, it's about lives." She gestured to a colleague who stepped forward with visible determination, one of the nurses behind her. Sarah was one of the first to share her interactions with patients who felt dismissed and overlooked. Sarah spoke up, her voice tinged with both warmth and conviction. "I didn't know how to advocate for them. I feared retribution for stepping outside the lines." As she recounted her experiences, the crowd's attention shifted, their empathy igniting like a spark carried across a dry landscape. As they shared more stories, intertwined with their emotions and experiences, Mary's heart swelled. The walls, once fortified by Caldwell and institutional indifference, began to crack. The collective power of heartfelt stories connected them, reminding them of the soul buried beneath clinical protocols. People began chiming in, offering their accounts of hope, frustration, triumph, and mistakes. The vibrant tapestry of narratives wove a resilient network anchoring their collective resolve to fight against a rigid system. But Caldwell still loomed, eyes calculating. "You're treading into precarious territory," he warned, his condescension evident. "Be careful how far you go with this movement of yours." Mary felt the challenge simmering in his tone, but she refused to retreat. "I'm not being reckless. I'm advocating for our patients who trust us. It's time to exceed clinical boundaries, connect better, and bring compassion to the forefront of care." Her words hung in the air, each assertion slowly melting the frost of Caldwell's disapproval. A tremor of uncertainty coursed through the room as she glanced at their faces, uncertainty mixed with newfound hope. "I propose a shift, not just in protocol, but in the dynamics that define our interactions with patients. By documenting our real-life experiences, we can challenge established protocols with evidence rooted in compassion." As the gathering continued absorbing her vision, Mary felt an ensemble of shared convictions swell in the room. They were not alone anymore. They were a coalition of voices previously silenced by fear of reprisal. Just when Mary's confidence began taking hold, Caldwell interjected once again. "And what do you intend to do if you face administrative pushback? For every hurdle presented, we'll create unity in our approaches. We'll prepare to fight the same battles, highlight our reasons, and advocate together. This doesn't end here. It begins now." She focused on cultivating resolve through proximity, not fear. The collective murmur in the room, filled with resolve, whispered affirmations. They were ready. Mary felt invigorated. The energy was palpable, a breath of fresh air. And perhaps the very institution that had once seemed insurmountable was beginning to crack because of their collective courage. With urgency radiating from her heart, she continued to energize her peers, crystallizing the collective belief in their shared mission. The more she spoke of empathy, trust, and understanding in patient care, the more the weight of Caldwell's authority waned. As the meeting transitioned into a constructive dialogue, Mary realized that she was no longer a single voice. Her evolution from the role of a housekeeper to a confident advocate marked a significant triumph, not just for herself, but for everyone unwilling to concede their power. Finally, as the meeting agitated to a close, Caldwell's once rigid expression softened just a touch, revealing a subtle acknowledgement of her tenacity. "Let's see where your initiative goes," he conceded, albeit begrudgingly. The words hung before her like an unburdened promise. The winds of change were gaining momentum. Mary smiled, relieved but resolute. "With your support and that of this incredible collective, we'll thrive. Our journey for genuine compassion starts here, together." Walking away from the cafeteria, Mary felt lighter yet empowered. She had conquered an intense fear, stepping firmly into her identity. This was a victory, not merely for her father, but for a community yearning to claim healthcare founded on compassion and connectedness. In those transformative moments of shared discovery, she had achieved a significant personal milestone, a reconnection with authenticity, strength, and the unwavering recognition that meaningful change emerges when voices are united. The journey was only just beginning, but now she knew she could face it head-on. The shadows of doubt that once loomed over her had receded. Instead, she stood among those willing to embrace compassion and audacity. After all, it wasn't just about contending with Caldwell. It was about embracing an identity rooted in courage, a true testament of perseverance. And standing firm in that belief, she transformed from a housekeeper into a leader. Now more than ever, the message was clear. Change begins when we dare to advocate not only for ourselves, but also for the lives that depend on us. This partnership with her colleagues symbolized the blossoming of her advocacy, a resolve not easily extinguished. As she stepped out into the bustling hospital corridors, Mary could feel the pulse of hope and newfound strength radiating around her. It was no longer about confinement, it was about possibility. True fulfillment awaited, and she knew, without a doubt, she had stepped into a new chapter of her life, one defined by collaboration, conviction, and courageous hearts united by compassion. And this was just the beginning. Now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel if you want to witness more inspirational transformations. Please leave a like now to nurture our growing community and feed the algorithm so others can resonate with these stories. I want to hear your theories and reactions. Comment below about what you think of Mary's journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how one person can change the world.